Okay, good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This morning, I'm really pleased to have with me as my guest Bradley Krack, who's a partner at Gunderson Dettmer. Bradley, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks for having me.
So now you have one of the more unusual backgrounds I have come across, and I see you served in the Navy for 6 years. Tell me a little bit about what motivated you and interested you to go into the military to begin with.
Yeah, I do have a tradition, a family of a naval service. It skipped a generation, but both my grandfathers served in World War II in the Navy.
Mm.
So something I was always kind of aware of, but it wasn't top of mind when I was studying engineering in college at Northwestern. And I think I just had this moment of, I don't know, epiphany or something, but I'd like to say it was an epiphany, but I remember distinctly I was in the lab working on something for a project late at night in the engineering building, and there was a free Pizza Hut pizza offer, and that really sucked me in. The Navy was there. I met some people, but seriously, I think it was just a desire to kind of, that I've always had to see the world, and I thought, I wanted to apply some of the engineering things I'd learned on a nuclear submarine, something in the real world, not just in a laboratory, and that really appealed to me, and I think it was so that was kind of what drove it.
Huh. Do you think that, did you hear a lot about the military from your grandfather growing up and stuff like that? Because, usually most people aren't attracted to the idea of the discipline and the work and the regimen and all that that's required in going to the military.
I did hear some stories, a fair number, particularly from one of my maternal grandfather who was also a police officer after that. He had a very colorful set of stories in his life he liked to share. But yeah, they weren't, I would say they were not stories that really made me want to join the Navy, but it gave me sort of an appreciation for service and for wanting to do something to, kind of beyond just academics and kind of kind of having a higher purpose. And but yeah, it wasn't something I always wanted to do though growing up.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
very math and science focused and just academics mostly.
Huh. What was your backup career at that point before the military, or did you have one?
I was going to get a PhD in materials science and engineering. So I stopped at my master's when I committed to join the Navy. And so I would have been doing some theoretical, kind of like theoretical physics, but with, applied to physical materials. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not to get too sidetracked on this point, but what kind of physical materials were you working on?
I was doing computer simulations actually so it was like thin films of alloys using quantum mechanical kind of Monte Carlo simulations and things like this. It was all very kind of computational and kind of this was in the early 2000s, back when you'd have to have your own supercomputer cluster sort of in your laboratory. You couldn't just fire them up on AWS, and so it was a little bit more coding, Fortran coding in different languages involved. People have it. It's much easier now, I understand, to do these things.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Back then.
So what was it like joining the Navy? You obviously did it for a while, so it must have been interesting. Tell me, what was it like?
Yeah, it was very interesting. So just sort of from a historical perspective. So I graduated in December 2001 from college, so 2 months after 9/11. This had been about a year or so after I'd committed to join the Navy. So I joined in peacetime, and then we're going into 9/11. So then, it was a very kind of unknown. There's a little bit of anxiousness on everyone's part. And so I went from graduation to officer candidate school for 3 months in Florida, Pensacola, Florida, which was a great experience, getting trained by Marine gunnery sergeants, and it was a very memorable time. Bonded with a lot of people there, and then so 2 years of it. Interestingly, for the submarine force, you have to commit to 5 years. So I didn't stay in that much longer than I had to, but it's about 2 years of training. So there's officer candidate school, then there's nuclear classroom training about nuclear physics and nuclear power plants. We sit in for 6 months in South Carolina, and then it was 6 months in upstate New York, training on it was called a prototype nuclear reactor. There's one up in the woods, and you go and they teach you how to run one similar to one that would be on a ship. and then then went to Connecticut for 3 months to submarine school to learn a little bit about submarines, and then I got sent to Guam. I was assigned to my first ship in Guam. There were 2 submarines there. My ship, the City of Corpus Christi, was the first home ported in Guam, so it was kind of an experiment for the Navy back when they were running out of. They weren't building submarines as quickly as they were being decommissioned, and so there was there's a demand for a number of days, on station, they call it, on forward deployment, that the submarines had to be out, west of the date line. And so Guam was a solution to fix that, because Guam is west of the date line, and so we were always forward deployed. So it kind of solved some of the commanders' budgeting requirements. So yeah, I got to do a lot of interesting things for those 3 years on a ship, probably half the time submerged. So went all over the world. I joined my ship in Australia, lived in Guam, went to Japan many times, all over Southeast Asia. So it was very interesting time in my life.
What's it like living on a submarine? I mean, I can't even imagine what that must have been like.
It gets it becomes it's like living in a building where it's probably, I don't know, I would analogize it to living in the Midwest or something during winter or something. Like you don't go outside very often. You kind of live on a routine. You do your watch shift for 6 hours, and then you would have some admin time to do admin things and manage your division for another 6, and then maybe you have a little bit of personal time and then sleep for about 4. Interestingly, at the time, I think it's now changed because due to scientists showing definitively that this is very bad for human health. We lived on 18-hour days, and so we would be on an 18-hour clock cycle. So we just kind of, you'd wake up, you go to bed and wake up a 6-hour offset from where you got up or went to bed the day before.
Wow.
So it was we're always kind of tired.
I can imagine. But
yeah.
I mean, like, isn't most days, I mean, nothing happens 90% of the time, right? I mean, isn't it incredibly boring and tedious? I mean, what kind of a life that must be?
Yeah, no, I think, it keeps itself interesting. I think you're always training for something. You're always getting evaluated. There's always exams. There's always, tests. There's always drills. There's always, you have to simulate fires, simulate casualties. So there's always something. You're continuously learning. So it's a time of, there's an immense amount of information you have to take in and learn over the first year of your time on the ship. So it was very challenging, and it's not boring at all, I would say. But it can be. Ideally, when you're out on deployment, the only time it's really boring is when you're actually doing a mission of national importance. You do the thing you're training for. Ideally, it's very boring, right? At least in the nuclear power plant. Ideally, you're just sitting there at a very low power output level. The power meter is not moving. You're sitting there, not doing anything for 6 hours. Whereas the forward part of the ship, on the people in the control room, periscopes and others are doing things. But yeah, ideally that's boring. But the rest of the time, it's actually pretty. It's pretty.
What about the training? Was that very intense? I mean, it sounds like you did training for like 3 years before you even got deployed. What was that like?
Yeah, it was pretty intense. I think the most intense was probably the year of, it was the boot camp plus the year of nuclear training. It was just a lot of information to master and memorize. And then the second 6 months of the prototype was on, you were doing shift work. So you'd be, 1 week you'd go to work at midnight or something, so it'd be, because there's only one power plant, so you'd have to shift people around, so it was good. It was hard from that perspective, just learning how to manage your body and your time and being up at odd hours.
No, I'm assuming that a lot of people sign up for the military, they get there and they think, wow, this is not for me, and they drop out quickly. I mean, I'm guessing that, I mean, did you go through that, or was it when you got there, did you think, wow, this is for me? I mean, what was your reaction?
Yeah, I think people, have through different evolutions, and the people you don't think you think will leave at their first opportunity will stay for 20 years, and vice versa. Yeah, I think there were times when it was very tough, and people, you think, I don't want to do this for my career, but there are other times when it was pretty pretty amazing, pretty interesting.
Hmm.
So
Well,
very.
what was the part that really amazed you or captivated you? I mean, was it the work or was it the people that you work with? What was it that was captivating?
Definitely I think it's a combination of just yeah, it's the people, you know, you're together with a group of people for, you know, a very concentrated, intense period of time, and you have to get along, right? So you don't leave work. You're always at work. And
Yeah.
so some of it's internal, it's personal, it's how do you manage your emotions? How do you manage interpersonal relationships in this context where you can't just punch out and go home and invent or whatever it is you do. You're stuck with these people. So you find ways to get along. And I think that and people do, and it's pretty, yeah, the submarine force has, you know, great camaraderie, and people from very disparate backgrounds get along very well. Yeah, some people may develop strange senses of humor, but people get along really well. I think that's one interesting part. And also just the mastery of, at the end of my sea tour, you know, you just have this sense of mastery of subject matter. And it's not just book knowledge, but it's, you know, this whole, you know, 1,000-ton, you know, multi-1,000-ton ship that I'm driving, that I know, you know, everything about. I'm just, you know, you just feel a sense of like, hey, I'm, you know, kind of in the flow state with this, you know, it's like massive, you know, piece of machinery. And so it feels pretty rewarding in that sense as well, I think.
I'm assuming it's very hard to have a romantic relationship while while you're doing this job.
Yeah, it tended to be. Yeah, it was tough. Yeah, being on a remote Pacific island and being out to sea for a lot of time was tough. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that must have been also difficult.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, so so difficult in different sense. Like if you're single, it was difficult. If you're married, it's also challenging
Yeah,
because
right.
your loved ones, your kids are not, you know, or you don't see them for months at a time as well. So
Do you think, I mean, it seems to me like it takes a certain personality to be able to do this and live that kind of life. I mean, do you agree with that? And do you think you had that personality?
I think so. Yeah,
So,
I think so. It was all, you know, you had to opt into it, you know, to be on a submarine. So I think that's part of the self-selection process.
yeah.
They also did some interesting psychological, you know, questionnaires and things at the end at submarine school. I don't know how, if they actually filtered people out with those, but yeah, I think it's, yeah, definitely you need to, you know, it's a big life decision. So I think something about that process, getting there sort of, you know, weeds, you know, out the people that would freak out if they, you know, be claustrophobic.
When you're on the submarine, how long are you out at a time before you actually come back home or whatever? Like, is there, I mean, how long are you stationed on any given mission or whatever?
Yeah, yeah. So being in Guam, we would, you know, basically on top of the deepest part of the ocean in the world, in the Marianas Trench, we could leave Apra Harbor, the harbor there, and be, you know, in 20,000 feet of water in, you know, 30 minutes. So you can submerge quickly. And so we would, you know, we would be underwater and underway and gone for basically for 2 months at a time at most. I think there was some federal law. I don't know what the law is now, but at the time there was something regarding mandatory vacation time if you're underway for a certain period of time longer than that. So we would tend to go out for these concentrated like 2 month periods.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but other submarines like in San Diego or other parts of the continental U.S., they would go out on, you know, 6 month deployments. They would, you know, be gone for 6 months and then come home, but they would stop at various ports. But we would just kind of be very surgical, go in and out because we didn't have to
I see. So during the
transit.
whole time you're in the military, do you even maintain like an apartment somewhere or maintain a residence somewhere, or you really don't even do that?
You do, yeah, yeah. I had an apartment, yeah,
Oh,
in
you
the various
do.
places I lived, yeah.
But you don't get to, I mean, you don't get to live there very often, so it seems kind of
No, yeah,
right. I mean,
yeah. It's
hmm,
interesting. It feels like a new home every time you come home. Yeah,
funny, funny.
yeah.
So after doing this for whatever 3 years, what made you decide to, did you, and how did you decide this is enough? Did you not think, did you ever consider a career in the military or
I
tell me about your
did.
thought process?
Yeah, I mean, I think for some of the reasons you mentioned, like, you know, having a family, having, you know, kind of quality of life. I mean, I think it's a big sacrifice, and I really respect those who make the decision to do this for their career. I think for me, it was just I wanted to, you know, do something else. I think, you know, it's and at the point, you know, you have to commit to staying for a certain period of time for each time. That I would have come back as a department head. That's another, you know, multi-year process. And so it's at some point, you know, you're either like, it's kind of binary. It's like should probably get out now, or else I'm going to stay for 20. And I just wasn't ready to make that call, but I really, respect those who did.
Well, you obviously went to law school when you got out. What made you decide to do that? How did that come into the picture?
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, one of my best friends growing up here in the Bay Area, grew up in the East Bay, was a lawyer, and really respected him. And I was a lot of submariners would go to business school, or military officers would. But I don't know, something about I don't know. I trust. Yeah, I just kind of looked into it. I'm like, this seems interesting. I don't know what I'm gonna decide, if I want to be a prosecutor or a corporate lawyer, what I want to do. Or I was interested in, kind of China affairs at the time, and learning Mandarin, and wanted to do kind of international relations and things. That's where I thought my head was at the time. And so I was I had enrolled in a dual program with Johns Hopkins, SAIS in Berkeley. I thought I was going to try to be a China wonk or something, or do something with China. But sort of that, I discovered the startup world, and I left that behind at the time.
Huh, interesting. And how did you discover that? Did you just stumble into it, or did you have some, how did you get into the venture capital startup world?
Yeah, no, I did. I grew up in the Bay Area. I went to Berkeley for law school, I just felt kind of, from my, personality type and just the people that I met, I just kind of felt like I resonated. I clicked with the corporate partners at Gunderson pretty well, and had a very good kind of sense. Like it kind of, I don't know if it was similar to the military, but I felt like I just had a similar sort of rapport with folks that I met. So,
do you do anything now? Are you on the reserve or anything like that? Do you have any affiliation with the military whatsoever, or as a retired military officer?
Not anymore. No. I mean, I do, try to keep up with things, and be involved with, but I'm not in the. I was in the reserves for a while after, during law school, and after that, but not anymore.
Did you get to talk to your grandfather about your time in the military? Was he still alive? Did you get a chance to tell him about your experience?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, he was. I mean, he was pretty sick, but yeah, he was aware of it, and was pretty excited for me, and it was yeah.
If you have kids, would you encourage them to do it?
That's a good question. I was actually just at a military Vets in Tech conference last week in San Francisco at the Marine Memorial Club, and there was a similar discussion. I don't know. I think it's a tough one. I don't know if I would encourage my kids to do it. But.
Yeah. I take it you don't regret it, and you think it was a good experience. I mean, what is your view on it now? It's been 10 years or so. What is
it was. I think it was a very formative experience for me in my life. I think it gave me a reservoir of life experiences to draw from, now as a professional in the legal industry, or just personally. I think I think it just gives you a lot of perspective on life, and I got to learn a lot of things and see a lot of things and travel a lot. And I think I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
I mean, I get the feeling once you've done something like that, like everything else in life is probably pretty easy, relatively speaking. Like,
maybe. Yeah, like it's kind of
once you endure that kind of life, isn't
to some degree. Although I think it's easy to get pretty soft pretty quickly. And it's like, as David Goggins, this SEAL say, he's always trying to. You got to find a new challenge every day. Otherwise, you'll just think of it in the past, and it kind of prevents you from doing new things and being successful today, because it's always a new day. But I think it does give you a perspective. Yeah.
Is there anything about your military life that you still try to maintain in your life? Like maybe, I don't know, sleeping a certain number of hours or waking up earlier. Is there any residual aspect that you sort of maintain in your life now?
I'm a very early riser. I think partially due to that. But yeah, no, I was never the best, shoe shiner and bed maker, sheet folder, but ironer. But I do think some of those disciplines, carried over into my life, and I think getting up early is probably the biggest one. Physical fitness is important.
Yeah. Do you think it helps you be a lawyer in any way? Does it help your lawyer mentality, or does it help you in any aspect of your legal practice?
Having been in the military, I think so. I think it's it's like not, yeah, no one's gonna die, you know, if this or that doesn't, if this or that happens or something doesn't happen. I think, but you know, so it gives you that perspective, and then on the same hand, on the other hand, it's also like, hey, if we, you know, if the commander's intent is this is what we're gonna do and we're gonna accomplish it at this time, then you know, then we'll, you know, we'll make sure it happens, right? So I think it's a kind of two-sided thing.
Well, Brad, it's been a wonderful conversation, and I really appreciate your taking the time to share it. Like I said, I've interviewed a lot of people, and this is definitely one of the more unusual backgrounds I've come across.
Amazing. Thanks, Richard. It was a pleasure to meet you.
This is Richard Hsu and Bradley Krack. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.